Welcome back to Nation Insights. I'm here with my friends, Jer and Benj, and today we're diving into one of the films that I recently watched called Old Dads. It's from Netflix, and it brings a lot of very mature humor and heart to the topic of late fatherhood. And well, it's directed and co-written by comedian Bill Burr, who also stars in the movie. And it's a fresh look at what it means to be a father when society typically expects you to be preparing for retirement instead of preschool meetings.
Exactly, Dix. So to share, here's the Netflix description of the film. In this raucous comedy, three middle-aged fathers struggle to keep up with the more progressive world of parenting, career, and culture. The three middle-aged fathers mentioned are the film's three main protagonists, Jack, Connor, and Mike. Each portrayed brilliantly by Bill Burr, Bobby Cannavale, and Bokeem Woodman. These characters have been friends for decades, and now they find themselves entering the realm of fatherhood much later than they ever anticipated. So, being from an older generation compared to other parents, the movie talks about the generational gap using comedy and various pop references.
So, Benj, sure. Why don't you give our audience today like a quick summary of the movie?
Sure, no problem. In a nutshell, each of the three main characters in the movie is dealing with their own personal problems. For Jack, it is his anger management. For Connor, he clashes with his wife over how to discipline their son. And for Mike, it is his reluctance to enter into long-term commitment. The story of the three dads and their families are also intertwined with each other, as their sons go to the same school, they work in the same company, and they often hang out together. A major turning point in the movie was during a company trip. The three dads were caught talking about inappropriate and politically incorrect topics while using offensive language, which caused them to be fired from their company. At the same time, the personal life of the main character, Jack, unravels as his wife kicks him out of the house because of his frequent outbursts that have negatively affected their son's future. So, Jer, why don't you continue and share how the film ends?
Alright, sure, Bench. So, after this happens, at the low point of the film, Jack and Mike reconcile after meeting at the diner. And along with Connor, the three of them decide to make a spontaneous trip to Las Vegas to relax and to just get away from their problems. So during at a strip club, while Jack is conflicted about what to do with his family or what to do next, since he was just recently alienated from his wife, Mike gets distracted in a night bar and momentarily decides to leave like his past life and his problems. However, the aha moment in the film, or the main point, was when Jack receives a call that his wife is to blame for. And at that moment, he realized that he has to go back to his family. He convinces Mike to also go back with him and Connor, and the three of them go back. So after getting into a bar fight and riding some scooters to the hospital, Jack reconciles with his wife in the operating room, while Connor and Mike also make amends with their partners. And the film concludes by showing Jack as a reformed man who is in better control of his emotions.
Thank you, Benj and Jer, for summarizing the film for everyone. So now let's dive in, no? Let's dive into the three main characters of the film. And particularly, let's begin our focus on the main protagonist, and that's Jack. So throughout the film, he questions the effectiveness of modern parenting methods, such as pampering children, like telling them not to say no or something related to that, sending them to expensive private schools. So for Jack, it is important for his son to learn how to stand up on his own and fight for himself, since that's how Jack was raised when he was growing up. So, moreover, Jack is fond of modern society as he despises the excessive need for safe spaces, obsessive social justice, and everything that he feels falls under extreme sensitivity. So, for Jack, he places great importance on individualism and the value of freedom of expression. So I think that it's also fair to say that Jack has a very quick temper, and this causes him to often get into conflicts and disagreements with other people. Well, near the beginning of the movie, he explodes at his son's school principal for reprimanding him for not following the rules, even though he was just 2 minutes late. While working at Trifecta, the business he and his friends founded, Jack is shocked at the company's new modern work culture, which he thinks is hypersensitive. His new boss, Aspen, directly just juxtaposes Jack's more traditional ideals, as Aspen represents modern society's picture of being politically correct and inclusive towards all people. I guess it is these topics are really important, but it was overly mocked and over exaggerated in the movie. Jack is very cynical of the woke culture of the current generation, as he and his friends are used to speaking about whatever they think of.
On the other hand, Connor embraces the challenge with a sort of naive enthusiasm. You could say that he's the optimist of the group, always trying to see the best in the new parenting trends, even when they don't fit his lifestyle or understanding. In his family, his wife, Kara, assumes the role of head of the household, while Connor is relegated to merely following the whims of his wife. His friends, Jack and Mike, admonish him for this, as this is against the traditional norm where the father is the head of the family.
Okay, so for the last main character, it's Mike. So he brings a cool, calm, and collected demeanor to the group. He tries to balance between the old and new ways, often finding himself mediating between his friends' more extreme views. So Jack is more traditional, while Connor is more like hipster type, or he's more moderate. So Mike comes face to face with a dilemma in the movie when his younger girlfriend becomes pregnant. Having already had 2 adult sons from an ex-wife, Mike is reluctant to enter into a long-term commitment to become a husband and father again.
Now that we talked about the key characters in the movie, right? Let's try to move on to our main protagonist, Jack, and perhaps discuss the wants and desires he has, which was his drive and motivation for his actions and decisions throughout the film. Though I'm really curious from you guys, anyone of you can answer. What do you think he really wanted in the movie?
It's the stars. I think at his core, Jack just wants to be a good father and husband for his family, while maintaining his identity and autonomy in the face of a rapidly changing societal landscape. He struggles with the modern parenting ethos and social justice movements that dominate his son's private school and broader cultural movements. He values the traditional aspects of parenting and struggles over the new norms that seem overly cautious and restrictive. His main goal throughout the film is to navigate these changes without losing his sense of authority and personal freedom.
So I agree with you, Bench. While Jack is willing to do anything for his son's future, such as apologizing to the school principal even though he thinks he didn't do anything wrong in front of other parents, and he even set up a fundraiser so that his kid would get a good recommendation from the teacher. But at the same time, his hot temper and inability to see things from another perspective always puts him in hot water with others. Aside from this, Jack desires to live and work in a place that will be less critical of him and of people from his generation. This is exemplified by the clashes he has with the new management team in Trifecta, the company he and his friends founded. Lastly, one of the main things Jack desires is a sense of brotherhood and friendship with his longtime friends Mike and Connor. With them, he can be himself as they are from his generation and they grew up together. When they face the aforementioned problems, they spend time listening to each other's point of views and opinions on the matter as they value each other's opinion.
Thank you for discussing his desires. I think now's a good time into transitioning into his decision-making process. So, we'll analyze his decision-making process in the lens of Ignatian spirituality as explained by Martin in his text, A Jesuit Guide. So a core aspect of Ignatian decision-making is the discernment process, which we can define as the impartial method of making choices that align with your deepest purposes. Ignatius stresses that proper discernment leads to decisions that are in line with God's will and which give lasting joy and content, which he calls consolation. So do you think Jack was able to practice Ignatian discernment?
That's a really great question, huh? I mean, for me, I think that for the first half of the movie, he did not practice proper Ignatian discernment, and I think it's pretty obvious for anyone who watches it, as he did not really practice a Jesuit concept called Ignatian indifference, as what we've learned. According to Martin, the first step towards proper discernment is to free yourself from your biases, thoughts, and feelings whenever you have to make a decision. So, for Jack's case, he made many rash decisions and choices without really thinking things through. So, in the beginning of the film, right, when Jack is talking to Leia about how to raise their child, Jack does not listen to the points raised by his wife. Well, he does hear it, but he doesn't take it into heart. He kept a closed mind because he had already decided beforehand that he did not do anything wrong by answering back at the school principal. He was adamant that Nate did not have to go to private school since Jack himself turned out fine after going through public school when he was growing up.
Also, I agree with your example, Dix. And I would like to share another time in the movie when Jack did not practice proper Ignatian indifference. So, there was this scene when Jack, Mike, and Connor were tasked by their boss to find Ed Cameron, on the business trip. And they were on a road trip together with one of their much younger colleagues, Travis, who pointed out their misogynistic banter in the car. And then to this, Jack immediately responded by saying, evolving, it's a good idea, like your generation, right? So basically, in this way, he was attacking the younger generation. So Jack dismissed the possibility that their behavior was inappropriate since siguro ever since they were young, they've been making misogynistic remarks without anyone telling them otherwise. So he, Mike, and Connor decided to continue this behavior since it's already normal for their generation. The dads were unable to make the right decision to change since they remained attached to their generational biases.
To add to the discussion, Martin talked about two kinds of Ignatian decision-making. The first type deals mostly with reason and analyzing the pros and cons of each decision, while the second type focuses on imagining possible scenarios and their consequences. I'd say that Jack discerns what he truly desires using the second method of Ignatian decision-making.
Wait, Benj, really? How so?
Okay, I also agree with you, Bench. But instead of putting himself in someone else's shoes, Jack puts himself in the shoes of his potential self if he decided not to change or reform for the better. Near the end of the movie, there's a strip club. Yeah, he comes to this idea near the end of the movie, during a lap dance at the strip club. He says, I have faced a lot of stuff in my life. The fear of losing my family is worse than anything I've ever faced before. My brain just keeps running this scenario of what could happen. Seeing my kid every other weekend. My wife's gonna be married to some orthopedist. And right after he says this monologue to himself, he gets a call from Brittany about his wife being in labor. So to me, Jack's short monologue helped him decide what was most important to him at that moment, which was his family. If he decided not to reform himself, he was scared of the idea of spending his later years alone, separated from his wife and children. If he did not decide to reform himself at that point, he would have regretted his decision in the future.
I think I'm getting on, or rather, I'm picking up on what you're saying. So, in a sense, he's wrestling with the idea that he could potentially end up being a father, separated from his son and his wife. So, he feels heartbroken at the thought that he won't be at the center of his son's journey, and that his wife would be attached to another person other than himself. So, it was somehow like a literal call. Well, not really from God, right? But from Brittany, for him to snap out of it and realize that he's given a chance to redeem himself. And ultimately, although he can decide on choosing to stay at the comfortable place that they're at, well, it was a strip club or a hotel, wherever they were at, he chooses to be the father that he wanted to be. And that is to return to his wife and be a father.
Thank you for the wonderful discussion, Dix and Jay. But actually, what I agree, because of course, obviously I'm the one who brought it up. I also think that Jack and his wife also practice some aspects of the first method of Ignatian decision-making according to James Martin, which focuses on reason and evaluating potential choices. Jack and his wife place great importance on deciding on a proper school for Nate. They likely weigh the pros and cons of different schooling options, considering options like quality of education, social environment, and accessibility. Similarly, Jack's decision to seek therapy likely stemmed from recognizing the negative impact of his anger on his relationships and the need for professional help to address it. He addressed the pros and cons of going into therapy and decided that the potential reward of becoming a better role model for his children was definitely worth it.
So I agree with that, Bench. So now let's go back to the conclusion of the movie for the audience, and let's see what Jack eventually decided to do for himself and his family.
As the trio sits in the strip club, Jack, remember, he receives a call informing of Leia's labor. And despite being a little bit drunk and tipsy, the group realizes that there is a sense of urgency and quickly attempt to secure a way back home. And well, after a failed attempt with Uber due to traffic problems, they resort to electric scooters to hasten their journey, and regrettably, they miss the birth of their child. However, Jack reconciles with Leia, pledging to seek therapy, and ultimately, they opt to enroll Nate in public school. Finally, Jack commits to managing his anger issues. So in the last scene of the movie, he is friendly to a passerby, criticize him, which is a signifier of his better control over his emotions, and that the therapy finally is seen to have progress on him.
Going back to Ignition discernment, Martin categorized decisions according to times. I think that the good decision Jack finally made at the end of the film falls under the first time of decision making. Once he had his graduation moment when Brittany called, the decision to reform himself for his family was clear and straightforward. There were no alternative choices of action that Jack had to consider. Upon receiving the call, Jack immediately knew that he must go back with Connor and Mike to the hospital to reconcile his differences with his wife and pledge to become a better husband and father for his family. I think that the decisions made by Connor and Mike to fix their relationships with their partners likewise fall under the first time of decision making.
Thank you for your sharing, Bench. I agree that the decision Jack made falls under the first time, since it's a relatively straightforward decision to go back to their families. And for me, honestly, it's like a no-brainer decision, since it's obviously better for him to become a good father and to raise his son together with his wife. So now that we have analyzed the major decisions made by our main protagonist in terms of Ignatian spirituality, let's delve into another key concept in discernment, which is consolation and desolation, which was discussed by Joseph Priest, Dean Brackley. So in short, consolation is a positive emotional state that gives a person profound joy and contentment. So a consoled person, or a person on the journey of consolation, is moving closer to God and experiences a sense of purpose and fulfillment. So on the flip side, desolation is the opposite, as it is a state of doubt and uncertainty. Those on the path of desolation struggle to find meaning and purpose in life.
But I think for the majority of the film, Jack was on the path of desolation, struggling with internal turmoil. He constantly struggled to reform his life, and specifically his anger issues and inability to be open-minded. So his behavior, well, negatively affected the people around him, especially his family and his friends. So he's constantly conflicted on whether to change his attitude for the better by controlling his emotions, or, well, continuing to live the way he always has. Well, according to Brackley's rules for discernment, Jack fits under the category of being less spiritually mature, as he doesn't see anything inherently wrong with continuing to act in a self-centered way, all the way up until the end of the movie, letting his emotions get the best of him. In the process, he falls further and further down the path of desolation until the point where he is alienated from his son and eventually his wife. And despite this, he continues to see his behavior as acceptable and comfortable, being able to say whatever is on his mind without regard to the thoughts or feelings of other people.
Yeah, I agree with you, Tix. Jack's values his freedom and autonomy of being able to act and say whatever he wants above all. Whenever something bad happened to Jack, such as when he was kicked out of Trifecta or when he insulted the school principal at a fundraiser, he always attributed his misfortune to other people instead of being introspective and considering that maybe it was his behavior that caused the debacles. He resigned to the fact that he has done nothing wrong himself and that the misfortune was bound to happen, or that it was expected given the unfavorable circumstances, such as the differing beliefs of the new generation.
So whenever Jack tries to go on the path of consolation, such as when he tries to control his emotions, he feels very uncomfortable and reluctant. So an example that comes to mind was when he was at his son's preschool, when he apologizes to the principal for his previous behavior. The apologies he utters seems kind of forced or unnatural, since he doesn't really believe in what he's saying. Eventually, he reverts back to his normal behavior when explaining what he did to his wife. So this is in line with what Brackley says is the uncomfortable shift from desolation to consolation for people who are less spiritually mature. When Jack's wife points out his propensity for anger outbursts after Jack cursed out the principal, Jack dismisses her by saying, "Oh Jesus Christ, with the effing therapy, here we go again." So since Jack is spiritually mature, he views the path of consolation, in this case, getting therapy for his emotional outbursts, as an obstacle, and he is immediately against the idea of trying to fix something about himself. So as shared by Brackley regarding the pitfalls of desolation, the first rule of desolation is don't make important changes. People on the path of desolation are unable to assess alternatives properly because they are misguided by the evil spirit. In the case of Jack, this evil spirit is his own self-centeredness. His refusal to admit his own wrongdoings, and is often inappropriate and insensitive behavior.
Thank you for that, sir. I'd like to add that Jack's desolation extends to his two longtime friends, Mike and Connor. By talking together, they affirmed the negative beliefs of one another. An example was when they were driving in the wilderness to find Ed. Jack and his friends were making very misogynistic and racist remarks. They viewed themselves as belonging to a different and better generation than the millennials, personified by Travis and Aspen, who tried to appear more politically correct and quote-unquote woke. We can see this as an example of practice observation that consolation and desolation are contagious as they exist within social groups. Jack and his friends perpetuate desolation by saying things like, "Come on, do you seriously not say the N-word when rapping this verse?" In effect, the three dads are trapped in a static bubble of their beliefs as they refuse to update and modernize their societal views.
But I have to admit though, Bench, by the end of the film, once Jack decides to go back to his family and reform his behavior, he finally gets on the path of consolation. And this is already after the movie. This is not something that we see explicitly in the scenes. And this is evident when he transforms from being self-centered and solely wanting freedom for himself to becoming a man for others, specifically for his family. So even after he lost his job, he found a life purpose of raising his newborn baby girl and making amends with his wife. The journey from desolation to consolation was clearly very difficult for him, as evidenced by just how long it took Jack to finally decide to do the right thing, and particularly the odd but unorthodox setting that it happened. However, the important thing is that he changed for the better at the end of the movie. And in the last scene, we can see how he doesn't let his emotions get the better of him anymore, since he wants to become a good role model for his children. So, to tie it all up, in my opinion, his decision seems reasonable given the circumstances portrayed in the movie. So enrolling Nate in public school could provide him with diverse social experiences and potentially access to resources that could benefit his education. So Jack's commitment to therapy demonstrates a proactive approach to addressing his personal challenges, which could lead to improved family dynamics and overall well-being for everyone. However, missing the birth of his child due to their intoxicated state, well, it highlights the consequences of their previous actions and underscores the importance of being responsible in crucial moments. Overall, while their decision may not be perfect, they reflect a willingness to acknowledge their shortcomings and take steps toward positive change.
So I think the main decision Jack made was committing to therapy, committing to manage his emotions, and listening to his wife. So while I think his commitment to therapy is commendable, we might question whether it's a genuine effort towards self-improvement or merely a token gesture to appease his wife, Leah, and temporarily alleviate the tensions in their relationship. We may argue that Jack needs to demonstrate sustained dedication to therapy and to actively work on addressing his anger issues to ensure long-term positive changes in his behavior and family dynamics on the path of consolation.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you, sir. Because even though their progress and conclusion leave their family in a good resting place, I think that there are still aspects in their life that need to be improved a little. Although already showing signs of improvement toward the end, it was only the first step of Jack finally listening to Leah's word of anger management. In that case, enhancing communication between Jack and Leah would greatly improve their relationship and parenting. They could work on actively listening to each other's concerns, expressing their own feelings more honestly, and finding constructive ways to resolve conflicts, instead of always reverting back to anger.
So I Belge, and I would like to add like a psychological perspective on how Jack can further reform himself. So with regard to his anger management issues, I think that both Jack and Leah can continue to work on regulating their emotion in various situations. This includes identifying, practicing relaxation techniques, and finding healthy outlets for stress, especially for Jack. I mean, we didn't notice him control his emotions at the end of the movie, but realistically speaking, it's definitely not going to be an easy shift for Jack to suddenly reform a behavior he has been practicing all his life. So rehabilitation really takes time.
Well, a good point there, Jer, right? But I feel like we're missing a really key piece here, right? Because I don't think that they ever revisited the societal issues and the backlash they received during the rental car ride, which fired them to begin with. So throughout the movie, it was never revisited, mentioned, or brought up. I'm referring to when they were being misogynistic and in some parts having a little bit of racist terms, and say for the fact that when they saw their old boss again towards the end of the movie, but that didn't really play an important role anymore.
I see where you're getting at, Deeks. So yes, you're absolutely right. I agree with you. Jack hasn't really wrestled with the idea adapting to the new. Although we have seen signs of it. Remember when he was forced to take a scooter to try and reach his child's birth on time? I think that was the moment when Jack finally experienced how the movie portrayed modern life and modern society. It's a step into the discernment process for Jack, but I think Jack is still tied to his biases and norms from his generation. He still lacks freedom from himself, or as Martin would say, interior freedom, to being open to change, such as conforming to the ever-evolving norms of society.
Wait. So to clarify, what you're saying is that there are still plenty of steps that Jack has to overcome, apart from the anger management and communication issues we discussed earlier?
Yes, Bench. I think that Jack still hasn't moved on from his generational biases and still somewhat fails to understand or fully comprehend the merits of modern society.
I see. I think in a way, it's more of a sensitivity to the social issues as well that he may not grasp today. Yes, it was a heavily over-exaggerated in the movie to mock the overly political environment and atmosphere that we live on social media, but I don't think that we must discount these and merely write them out of the script, right? Case in point, misogyny is still a rampant issue that we haven't fully resolved in today's social world. I guess that is what Jackson has to work on, and the same goes back for his friends.
You have a really good point there. I hear what you're saying, Bench, because I just want to add something. It's just that the issues that you've mentioned definitely have to be addressed. Regardless, though, I think we still have to commend them for the steps that they've already taken. And as we've discussed earlier, each of them took very brave steps, something that they've never experienced before, and it's outside of their own comfort zones. Jack acknowledges anger issues, Connor stood up for himself, and Mike finally committed to be a father again, which is three different things that were distinct from what they were what their original character was in the beginning of the movie. So, well, while I'm not sure if these would imply that everything will be good at moving forward, something that we don't see outside of the movie, their actions after that night at the club were definitely a good, but, well, unorthodox start.
So for me, I could definitely see their actions as the beginning of better times for them. The peace and joy that they've shown during the ending resemble what Brackley describes as spiritual consolation. It seems like they've gained a wider perspective and new energies that direct them towards a more important purpose, which is their family. The dads place greater importance on their vocation or calling of being a man for others, supporting their partners and children, as opposed to focusing on their own desires.
I agree. I pray, assuming they're non-fictional characters, of course, that the three dads braved through their paths to reform. It's important for them to remember the events that prompted them to begin their journey of reform in the first place. Because as Brackley warns, it is the characteristic of the evil spirit to cause anxiety, to sadden, and to set up obstacles.
Well, I think that's all the time we have right now. Thank you again, Ben Ginger, for participating in our episode of Ignatian Insights. So once again, this is Deeks. I'm again with Benj and Jer, and that is all we have for today. Thank you everyone for listening to our podcast.
Thank you, everyone. Signing out.